This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast.
With Tony Bruschi.
That it is. We are talking with licensed psychologist Dr. John Delatore, and I want to move into the case of Kohberger a little bit. I want to get your take and wrap your mind and put yourself in the place of Steve Goncalves and the Goncalves family. They've been some of the most vocal in that case since the beginning, and they're pushing again now to have the gag order lifted so they can speak their mind, so Steve can speak out in public again about that case. This is something where I understand as best as I can, not ever having been in that situation, but as a father, if you're seeking justice for someone who murdered your daughter, there's probably not a whole lot that would make you stop. And you're going to keep pushing for whatever you believe is the right way of seeking that justice. The court, of course, been saying, we're going to keep this in place. There's another hearing coming up. But obviously, he wants to be heard. What's going on there? Is there something that he knows that he's not been able to talk about because of the gag order? Is this his grief and him just wanting to vent out? It's very hard to put yourself in that situation unless you're actually there. What have you observed from a psychological standpoint that you think is taking place?
I think it's both of those things. I think he sees that that there are certain things about the case, in particular, the issue with one of the survivors not wanting to speak, that kind of stuff. I think he sees aspects of the case not falling in line the way that he had hoped justice would find its way, in particular to Bryan Kohberger. I think he views Kohberger as, the guilty party in this. And so I think he wants justice done the way that he wants justice done. And he's feeling sort of strapped down by the idea that he can't get across the concerns that he has about the case. And I think he wants to make sure that the victims, in particular his daughter, that the victims in this case are always at the forefront, right? That in some ways, he wants the case to be about the victims and not about the perpetrator.
Mm-hmm. Could he end up doing more damage than good in his search for justice in this sort of way?
It's possible, and the only real way that I see that is during voir dire, when a jury is selected, they're going to be asked about, the potential jurors are going to be asked about, well, what do you know about the case? The real question is, despite whatever you've heard about the case, are you willing to put that aside in order to render a verdict based on the evidence? And I think that he runs the risk of having some individuals more aligned towards him that might eliminate them as potential jurors by speaking out, which is why I think the judge has this gag order. I think the judge is thinking about potential jurors in this case, wanting to mitigate the news media as best as the judge can, just to make sure that they can get the jury pool that they need. Because in some ways, the last thing that the community wants would be the case taken away and moved to a different jurisdiction in order to be played out. I don't think that would be very fair. But if a jury pool is tainted, that they can't find enough jurors because they're too aligned with wanting to find justice for the victims rather than seeking the truth and rendering a verdict based on the evidence, we run a real problem.
I'm just playing devil's advocate here. In his mind, I'm thinking, well, they'll find a jury. They always do. They'll figure it out. Has there been situations where they get into this, they start doing voir dire, and they're searching for that jury, and they realize it's a small community. There's only so many people, and they just can't get it done in that community. Then it delays things, and they do have to move it even after they started going into that mode of voir dire?
I think before then, I think the defense attorney would motion for a change of venue. I don't know that. I'm sure it has happened.
Yeah,
but I don't know that once they start getting the jury pool and they start figuring out and when, whittling it down, they recognize that there's not enough. I think they would just they would just do another pool again. They just bring more people. So I think if the father continues to make statements outside of the gag order, then the defense attorney would make the motion to change a venue just to, preempt any issue with a tainted jury pool.
What benefit does it serve to if the gag order gets lifted? They say the family can speak out, and let's say he starts talking a lot, starts doing interviews, this or that, with different outlets, expressing his thoughts, expressing his opinions, his theories, and such. How could that end up affecting the prosecution of Kohberger?
I think it really depends on what happens in terms of, will the judge sequester the jury? Because ultimately, I don't think that it really is as impactful on potential jury members as some people think that it is. I think people are willing to listen and watch the news, and I think most people don't even watch the news anymore, so it's not like that matters. But I think they're willing to put that aside. I think it only benefits the father, right? I think it only benefits him to get out there and to get this messaging out rather than keep it inside. I don't know that it necessarily is detrimental to the prosecution, because the only thing that they need to worry about is, do they have the evidence to support the case that they have charged Bryan Kohberger with? Media and other kinds of stuff should be inconsequential if you have the evidence. If you don't have the evidence, then that becomes a real problem.
It will be very interesting to see how this all plays out. Does it make the most sense, though, for all this information in terms of a fair defense and a fair prosecution, for these things just to come out in court and not to come out in the media prior to it? We're all sitting here and, this is what we talk about. This is what we do. We're salivating at the mouth, to lack of a better term, wanting to hear more. But in the interest of this taking place in a correct, fair manner, waiting for these things to come out in trial, does that just make the most logical and fair sense?
It does, but to me, only if the case is televised. Going back to Lori Vallow Daybell, it's not being televised, so we don't actually know. I mean, we do because we get it at the end of the day, but if the case is televised, right, live as it's being unfolded, then I think people will feel more calm. If it's not, then I think people will think that stuff's being hidden from.
This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast.
The Hidden Killers Podcast.
With Tony Bruschi.
Dr. John Delatore, thank you so much for your insight as we continue to examine and look at all the moving parts in this ever-evolving case against Bryan Kohberger. Be sure to press subscribe wherever you download podcasts so you don't miss any breaking updates or discussions on the cases as we follow them for you right here. I'm Tony Bruschi. Stay with us.